Okay, when most students encounter this passage, they rate it pretty lowly. This makes you work pretty hard to figure out how everything is related. And in diagnosing what goes wrong, a lot of students sort of say that it jumps around or it's choppy, and that suggests that the problem is cohesion. So what we're going to do in order to improve cohesion is apply the old to new principle. And instead of starting with what exactly the old to new principle is, let's just revise this passage, and then I'll identify what we did and why it counts as following the old to new principle. So the first thing that I'm going to do is identify recurring themes, so that their writing doesn't flow. I'm identifying flow here as something to highlight, that because it seems like it comes up a bunch. That their writing doesn't flow is a concern I hear from writers. Now we've got the cohesion strategies offered in chapter 3, so I'm going to highlight. We've got flow, we've got strategies. The ones in chapter 3 can help with the nebulous problem of flow. So this is back to that same idea, the nebulous problem of flow. Or as he calls it, cohesion. So cohesion is just another name for flow. We're essentially still talking about the same idea. The introduction of complex or new information before simple and old information within a sentence, plus a lack of creating links between the ends of sentences and the beginning of sentences that follow them, are key reasons why prose doesn't flow. So we're talking about prose not flowing some more. And these are the reasons why. Okay, so if these are the problems, then maybe not doing these things are the strategies, in which case it would be a lot clearer if these were phrased in terms of strategies instead of problems. But I'm guessing these have something to do with strategies. So strategies, don't do these two things or do these things better. The help that, again, we've got reference to these two guidelines, can provide the help that these two guidelines can provide can be enormous if applied correctly. So what I'm noticing here is this back and forth between the same themes. So when we follow the old to new principle, instead of going A, B, it'll go just from A to B. And I'll show you what I mean here. So here's how I rewrote it. Writers often worry that their prose doesn't flow. This nebulous problem, which Williams labels cohesion, can be remedied by applying strategies from chapter 3. There, Williams suggests that prose seems more fluid when writers do two main things: put familiar or simple information before new or complex information, and create links between the end of one sentence and the beginning of the next. These guidelines, when applied correctly, prove enormously helpful. So what we did when we arranged the passage, we mostly just sort of cut and paste and moved things around a bit, but we also rephrased these strategies from problems to strategies, so that's a big change. And so notice the stuff that I'd highlighted in green before, now it's blue, is together. Writers often worry that their prose doesn't flow. This nebulous problem, so now I'm echoing old information. This sentence, this nebulous problem can be remedied by strategies, begins with something old. The problem's already been introduced, so I've started with something old. And now I'm introducing a new thing, strategies. And here's a little reference, chapter 3. There, what I just said, chapter 3. Do two main things. And what comes next immediately is the two main things, and they are the strategies, not the problems. And then these guidelines, referring back to the thing I just said, are helpful. So the idea behind the old to new principle is that the beginning of a new sentence echoes old information. Now it'll get old and tired if every single sentence does this, but it might make sense, at least as you're practicing using this principle, to err on the side of using the old to new principle and lots of sentence level transition words, and then when you become skillful at choosing the right ones and doing it, pare back and decide what's too much. And as a general rule, erring on the side of over explaining to your reader while you're practicing is really useful to do, because perhaps the number one rule of thumb, or maybe you can call it zero, the fundamental rule of thumb you might have as a writer is everything makes so much more sense in your own mind. And it's hard to understand how difficult it is for other people to follow your progression of ideas. So really spelling it out, at least when you're drafting or when you're learning and practicing, is worth doing.